Part 2, The Ascetic. I traveled through the length and breadth of India, barefooted, without touching money, without thinking of the morrow, and with just one piece of clothing as my bed and garment. Swami Abhedananda. Chapter 12. On the Path to Devotion. So the seraphic master passed away, leaving behind him a rich spiritual heritage to be taken up by his blessed 11 to draw light and inspiration from it in their path towards new life. But the task of disseminating the grain of his thought throughout the world fell particularly on two of his chief disciples, Vivekananda and Abhedananda, the two sparks born out of the sacred flame of that pyre which consumed the earthly remains of Sri Ramakrishna. In studying the work of one whose whole life was a continuous fulfillment of the will of God, our first concern should be to look at the principal factors that form the fabric of his being and of the country from which soil he sprang. The meaning of Swami Abhedananda's glorious and eventful life may therefore suggest itself through an attempt to discover what place it occupies in the historical development of India and what the significance it has for her future. It seems he came just when his coming was most called for, when it was decreed by Providence. What he said and did during the long years of his life was the culmination of the past endeavors of the race, of its high achievements, a restatement and revival of which, as an actual experience on his own part, was needed so that India might regain her full stature as a nation conscious of its divine destiny. But before that, let us follow the events of his life after the 16th August, 1886, which is indeed a memorable date in the annals of the spiritual history of India in our times. When the saint of Dakshineswar closed his earthly life in Mahasamadhi, his young disciples were determined to work out the ideas propagated by Paramahansa, that is, to think of the spirit and live in God consciousness for the good of others. And to this end, they were firm and sincere. But it took them months and years before the work could be actually begun. And it also needed much training and self-preparation on their part in translating the Master's thought into living action. Much spade work awaited from them, although they possessed the necessary energy. But more energy was not enough. There was another important factor, a constructive genius, without which it was impossible for them to become the standard bearers of Sri Ramakrishna. Among the chosen 11, 2 were especially gifted with this trait, and as we proceed with the life story of our subject, we will see what a constructive genius Swami Abhedananda was, next only to his great spiritual brother, Swami Vivekananda. Now let us see how Kali Prasad the disciple became Kali Tapasi, the ascetic, and finally there emerged Swami Abhedananda, the teacher. But in between these stages there was the traveling monk, about whom we must discuss first just to follow the chronological sequences of our narrative. A fortnight after the death of the Master, we find Kali Tapasi in Vrindavan, in the company with the Holy Mother, who was then overwhelmed with grief following the passing away of her divine consort. Along with them went Jogan, Latu, and Tarak, fellow monks also. There were also a few women devotees in her company. On their way to Vrindavan, the party halted first at Badhyanatham, and then at Benares, where they stayed for 3 days. Years ago, accompanied by Sri Ramakrishna, Sharada Devi had visited this holy place, and the memories of those days flash before her mind now, making her all the more sad and sorrowful. From Daras, they went to Ayodhya, where they spent one night, and at last they reached Vrindavan, and here arranged for their stay or made at the Kunja, the abode of one Kali Babu, who was a younger brother of Sri Ramakrishna's householder devotee, Balaram Basu. Kali Tapasi, that is, Swami Abhedananda, however, did not stay for a long time at Vrindavan. He himself has recorded the account of his woodland travel at Holy Place, which is worth reproducing here. On reaching Vrindavan, I felt a strong desire to undertake a woodland travel, which is essential for anyone visiting this pilgrimage. This is known as the Vrindavan Parikrama. It is the customary with all Vaishnava devotees who visit the place to do so. Vrindavan is also known as Brajamandal, and for this purpose I gathered necessary information from the local Vaishnavas. At that time, I used to grab and garb myself in the ochre robes that I received from the hands of the master. All that I had with me then consisted of 2 pieces of waistcloth, the kalpin, 2 pieces of ochre cloth, the gurua bahivasa, and a small water pot, a kamandalu. Neither any blanket nor any bedding I had with me, not to speak of coins, which I never touched at the time. Food I used to secure by begging once a day at 4 or 5 places. The Brajavasis, the people residing permanently in Vrindavan, were very kind to me, and I went from house to house, uttering the words Narayan Hari. Whatever I thus procured, the alms consisted chiefly of breads prepared from maize and sweets. I ate them in the afternoon hours, and then I would set out for the woodland travel in company with the Vairagins, the saintly Vaishnavas of Vrindavan. At nightfall, I would spread out my Guruk robe under a tree over the dust of the holy place, and then I would enjoy a short snap in the open air. Thereafter, I would get up before dawn and begin the travel in the company of the Vairagins. At noon, as I reached in a village, I would do the begging, have some food and rest, and after that I would again commence my travel around the Brajamandal. But the Vairagins, though otherwise kind to me, never talked to me because of my ochre robe. They seemed to cherish in their minds a strong aversion for the sannyasins wearing ochre robes. Perhaps they were under the wrong notion that the sannyasin sect who do not worship Lord Sri Krishna must be atheists. Whereas I was of this sort of adverse feeling in their minds, I was aware of it, and I used to keep myself aloof from their company, without talking to them as I walked around the holy place. Here and there, places associated with the memory of Lord Krishna would delight my sight, and inquisitive as I was, I used to gather necessary information of those interesting spots from my fellow travelers, whom I followed wherever they went. Even to beg my food, I went behind them. One day it so happened that in a mood of trance I was chanting aloud in praise of Sri Krishna and recited a few stanzas of the Gopi Gita as incorporated in the Srimad Bhagavat, which I had memorized on a previous occasion. This attracted the attention of my fellow travelers, who were surprised at my devotion to Radha Krishna. They then addressed me, saying, "It seems, sir, you are a great devotee of our Lord Krishna, which we did not realize for very long. May we tend our apology to you for our act of omission. Allow us to attend on you from this day. You need not go begging. We will do that for you." Thus my act of begging was over since that day. There would be plenty of breads procured by them for me. Even at times, if I attempted to go out to beg, they would invariably prevent me from doing so, saying, "Where shall we find another devotee like you, sir? All that we beseech of you is the right to serve you, and may you be pleased to accept our service." It was from that day that my tour around the holy place was performed easily in the company with them. I visited all the spots associated with the memory of Sri Krishna, and as I did it, I realized more and more the glory of the Lord. At last, I completed the desired tour of 168 miles round the entire place. Returning from the tour, I went to see the mother at the place of Kali Babu, and after bowing down at her feet, I related to her the story of my sojourn. There I found every one of our party, excepting Swami Shivananda, on inquiry, and came to know from Jogan that he had left for the Barankar Muth, founded by Suresh Babu. My joys knew no bounds at this news, and at once I felt a strong desire to go there. I then solicited the permission of the mother, which was easily granted to me, and thereafter I proceeded to Calcutta to join my brother disciples at the new monastery. By his own admission, his pilgrimage to Vrindavan in company of Sharada Devi and others, and his subsequent woodland travel, were refreshing to the mind of the young traveling monk. It was this holy place which the master himself had once visited, and as such, it must have had a special attraction for him at the time. His stay at Vrindavan was a wondrous tale as recounted of it. He must have formed acquaintances of a number of pious Vaishnavas there, with whom, it might be imagined, he had frequent religious discourses and exchange of religious views. He had, of course, nothing but severe contempt for the lay Vaishnavas, whose ways of life he did not like. Long before Sri Ramakrishna, the Lord of Nadia, Sri Chaitanya, had also visited this place associated with the memories of Sri Krishna. In fact, it was Sri Chaitanya who salvaged this holy place out of the debris and once again placed it on the pristine glory. Thus, the place subsequently came to be regarded as the most holy pilgrimage, not only for the Vaishnavas, but also for all religious sects. Insofar as his spiritual urge was concerned, Kali Tapasi's short stay at Vrindavan was not fruitless. Although he was and has not recorded anything of his inner experience during this period, it may be surmised that he must have conceived the eternal Leela, God's play, as was realized by his master. He must have also realized that the Vrindavan lives, and one can actually feel that the trees and creepers of this holy place were not what they were to the eyes of the mortals. They were really saints, and it was love shackled with vain loving that had led them to take their births as flowering shrubs to adorn the Lord Krishna and kiss the dust of his feet. Although we often hear that there is no logic in the affairs of the heart, yet Pascal truly observes the heart has reasons which reason does not know. It would seem a sacrilege to the devotee that proceeds through the faith to allow reason to tear asunder the preternatural mist that enshrouds Vrindavan Leela, and the experiences of Sri Ramakrishna bears the glowing testimony to it. Did the great master not say to a devotee at Dakshineswar that those plants and trees which are kalpatarus dance to the tune of Sri Krishna's flute and to the rhythmical movements of his feet? It is not merely the poet who has said that every flower enjoys the air it breathes, but the scientists, with all their vaunt of exactitude and reason, have told us that mental phenomena are caused by stimuli in plants as well as in animals. Sri Vijay Krishna Goswami had also the same experience when he stayed at Vrindavan for 1 year. One of his biographers has related an incident which is worth quoting here. One day, a Sankirtan party was led by some devoted persons of Vrindavan, headed by Vijay Krishna. At that time, they were struck with wonder to notice the emotional ecstasy of a particular tree on the roadside. At this distance of time, when we imagine Kali Tapasi traveling around Vrindavan, visiting the places associated with the Leela of Sri Krishna, he must have experienced within himself that not only the music of the place, but also the warm radiance of the divine sentiment working on the surroundings, particularly on the wayside trees and creepers. This is no illusion or absurdity. This is realization par excellence. Thus, the woodland travel undertook by Swami Abhedananda at the early years of his Parabrajaka life must have had its benign effect on his mind, and it opened up for him greater opportunities for watching Krishna's Leelas, and for that matter of all pervading infinite or the absolute. In this he must have had the guidance of the spirit of his master. He did not merely see the woods, but Elysium regions where one meets with nothing but joy and plenty and contentment, where every gale whispers pleasure and every shade promises repose. His experience must have been that in these woodlands of shimmering green, there is naught to be done save to love and be loved. And the disciple must have experienced what once was experienced by his master. And Kali Tapasi returned to the Bharanakar monastery with heart brimmed over with love. From the path of knowledge, the young ascetic now advanced to that of devotion. The rest of Abhedananda's spiritual hope saw the consummation as well as synthesis of knowledge and devotion.